Welcome to the OD Learning Lab, a podcast where we explore the intersection of adult learning, leadership, and organization development. I'm your host, Dr. Kyle Zamanak, faculty in the Leadership and Organization Development program at the University of Idaho. This is your space to learn, reflect, and experiment with ideas that shape how we lead and grow in today's organizations. We'll dive into real-world strategies, research, and conversations with scholar practitioners and professionals who are pushing the field forward. Whether you're in higher education, nonprofit, corporate, or public service, if you're passionate about leading change and learning for impact, this lab is for you. Let's explore, let's grow, and welcome to the OD Learning Lab. In today's episode, I'm joined by Dr. Anthony Adkisson, a consulting professional with more than 25 years of experience, and who has a deep expertise in technical assistance. Anthony and I unpack how technical assistance differs and has some similarities between consulting and training, and how he uses a human-centered design process to assess organizational needs, build leadership and staff buy-in, and create meaningful long-term change. I'm also excited to share that Anthony will be joining me as a co-host in upcoming episodes. Let's dive in to the conversation. Today in the OD Learning Lab, we're joined with Dr. Anthony Adkisson, and you are going to be one of the co-hosts in the future. So I thought this was a great opportunity to, one, have everyone get to know you, but also bring in your expertise about technical assistance. And because there's a lot of confusion about like what technical assistance is, as well as like, is it consulting, is it not consulting?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Happy to be here and kind of happy to talk a little bit about technical assistance and my work and my understanding of technical assistance and the overlap and commonality between technical assistance, training, consulting, because while there is some confusion, there are similarities and differences. So appreciate you having me here today and look forward to joining you on future podcasts.
So let's just start off with the first question. Tell me a little bit about your background and how you became involved with, and we'll say technical assistance, but going forward, TA.
So, yeah, my background, I have 25 years of experience in nonprofit work and nonprofit management. My work has really sat at the intersection of workforce development, education, and human services. My early work started off working with older adults and doing programs for older adults in community centers, transitioned to teaching about sexual health and sexuality for a local nonprofit, and going out being the guy who would go to schools talking about HIV/AIDS, abstinence, STDs, and protection. That transitioned into then me going as the director of HIV and AIDS support for a local AIDS foundation organization, working with those who are impacted by HIV and AIDS in the community. I then transitioned to workforce development when I was working on my master's degree and my doctorate at Cleveland State University. And that really sort of is where the trajectory of my career has gone since in terms of workforce development. In 2011, I started working with men and women who are transitioning out of prison and incarceration back into the community and workforce development, and finding jobs and connecting to career pathways. And then in 2018, I decided to then go along the route of doing more consulting work. That's what took my work to being based in DC, working for some workforce development firms, doing consulting, technical assistance, and trainings and stuff that we're talking about today. What took me down that career path was my interest in not necessarily doing everyday program management as I had been doing for a number of years in the communities, but how to make programs better. What are the ways that we can help programs tweak what they do? A lot of organizations will say they have what's called that quote unquote special sauce, which is a combination of people, community, and certain practices. But how do we help them really strengthen their programs and create effective programs that could be modeled in other places? So I was really interested in understanding at a higher level and seeing sort of what other national programs were doing. So that's what pushed me into consulting. And I would say introduced me to technical assistance and sort of what technical assistance is and the differences therein between evaluation, consulting, training, facilitation. They all are very similar.
So a lot of interconnection between areas. So for someone who has never heard of technical assistance, What's a simple analogy you would use to explain it?
Great question. And I thought about this a little bit, and I came up with this analogy that I think will come up a little bit within our discussion today. Think about cooking with a chef. So think about a recipe book. If you have a recipe book and that recipe book is telling you how to cook something, that's training. It's training you how to put the ingredients together and to create that recipe. But it might not necessarily come out depending upon if you don't have the knowledge and skills of, let's say, cooking a classic Italian dish. Think about, cooking in a class and you're cooking with other people. That might be consulting. So you're working with someone who's at the head of the class. They have a recipe, they're working with you, and they show you how it's done once. So you do it once, then you move on. You might go back home, try to do that same meal, and you might get it right because you had that one class, but you also might need a little bit more practice. I would say technical assistance is like having that chef there with you one-on-one in the kitchen using your tools, your ingredients, your taste, and working with you side by side to help you gain the skill that you need to make that in the future. So when I think about technical assistance, I think about it as sort of that one-on-one subject matter expert who has the interest and understanding to help you take it to that next level. So someone that is working with you, not just training you one time, but working with you over an extended period of time, depending upon what the subject is and what the topic is. But they're helping impart into you not only knowledge and skills, but resources and tools, but also doing it within maybe your own environment, doing it within sort of your own level of comfort and taking you to that next level. For me, I would say it's kind of a basic analogy of understanding of what technical assistance is.
So I hear a lot like where training and consulting, it's kind of like they come in, they give it to you, they're done. Versus
Right.
technical assistance is really hands-on, like side by side, guiding them through the process. So can you go a little bit more in detail about like the difference between training, consulting, and even like let's put in coaching there as well.
Yeah. I would say that they are all sort of under the same umbrella. I would say they're under the same umbrella, and oftentimes the words training, coaching, consulting, technical assistance get kind of thrown around very differently. I would say that it really ends up being what the goal is of the client or the person who is bringing that person in. I will speak from my own experience as a consultant that oftentimes people may ask me to come in and work with their organization. I will consult with them first to really figure out and understand and ask questions in terms of what it is that they're looking for. And what may end up happening is I may then suggest provide training. And training may be what they need in that moment to just sort of help shore up their skills in a particular area. So the training may be a one-time facilitation with the group to train them on, let's say, career pathways and workforce development. So it begins with consulting in terms of asking broader, larger questions to then really fine tune in terms of what it is they're looking for. Are you looking for a one-time training just so that you can sort of meet certain metrics or certain goals? Are you looking for your staff to be coached? And with coaching, it's more about just sitting maybe with a team or a person one-on-one individually to help them kind of work through some of their situations and their tasks and things that they're trying to accomplish. Whereas then technical assistance is more of a longer term relationship. But again, when I say longer term, it really is dependent upon the project, the program, the goals, and what they're looking for. But it's really ensuring that at the end of the day or at the end of the project, in your end of your time with the client, that they have a better understanding of the subject matter in terms of what they are working on, how to implement it, and that you help them maybe think about whatever barriers they might come across once you remove yourself from the situation. One of the things I like about technical assistance is I may go in as someone with a subject matter expertise around workforce development, knowing that my time is going to be limited because at the end of the day, I want to strengthen their program so that when I leave, they're doing it on their own and they don't have to call me back. I want organizations to be learning organizations in the sense that they feel comfortable and confident after our time together to go off and do this and do it on their own. Whereas training, sometimes people might get training and that training lives with that individual, maybe not the organization. And sometimes training, you have to come back and do it again.
One of our earlier podcasts was specifically on coaching and the difference between that and mentorship. And so
Okay.
there are kind of nuances to that. Um, and so, what theory or model undergirds TA?
I would say there's several. There's not just one. I would say that there are several theories. It really depends upon the background of the person coming in to do the technical assistance, and it depends upon the issue or problem that they're trying to solve or work with the client on. I would say that technical assistance pulls from adult learning theory, experiential theory, communities of practice, systems theory, change management theory, a lot of different organizational theories around leadership. So all the above, it pulls from all of those. I myself, as a practitioner, tend to lean towards adult learning models as well as change management. And the reason I lean towards adult learning models is one, because a lot of the individuals I'm working with in organizations are adult learners. And so using their lived experiences in terms of not only them as practitioners, but those in terms of individuals that they're serving are adults with learned and lived experiences. So how do we help them in those instances? But then I also think about, change management and change management systems in terms of what is it we're trying to change? What is it we're trying to do differently? And within a lot of change management models, such as human-centered design, those are participatory in nature in that they are looking at the lived experiences of individuals and those who you're working with. So we bring them into the methods of what we're doing to make sure that we're using best practices that are going to impact them after we go away. But those are some of the theories or some of the methodologies that I use when I think about technical assistance.
So, where does TA add the most value, and when is it the right fit?
I would say that technical assistance is the right fit when organizations are looking to be responsive to change. If there's something that they're looking to do differently, not just necessarily give skills to their practitioner or to their participants, but they're looking to remove barriers, if they're looking to change systems, if they're looking to create some level of strategy to go off to that next level, I think where organizations are being responsive to those particular needs, that's when it's a good fit. I would say that it is not a good fit if there is not enough buy-in. If there's not buy-in from your staff or from leadership, then you're going to just end up spinning your wheels, and the things that you come up with together, the deliverables or the goal that you come up with together with your clients aren't going to get implemented. I've seen that in situations where if there's not buy-in from the staff, if the staff are like, oh, they roll your eyes when they see you come, they're like, okay, well, yeah, we've been through this process before. We know at the end of the day, we're just going to go back and do what we always do. So if there's not buy-in from your leadership, then it's not going to be really effective. But if there's buy-in from everyone involved that you're looking to accomplish a certain goal, build certain skills, create certain capacity for teams and organizations, then I think that there's an opportunity for it to be successful and for it to be a good fit.
Just kind of like a little follow-up question is, how do you understand or know that the organization has buy-in when you're thinking about like kind of these strategies of either going consulting, coaching, or going into technical assistance? So how do you know that there is buy-in?
Ask. It's as simple as asking, really, and doing check-ins. One of the things that I do, with clients that I work with is I just ask that question. So it depends upon who's bringing me in. Oftentimes it's leadership, so executive leadership that will bring us in. One of the things that I do in the discovery phase of my work and really understanding sort of what the issues and problems are is sitting down with members of the teams or teams that I'm working with, having group meetings with them, but then also having sort of one-on-one conversations with them. Part of the buy-in is checking in with people and individuals. So leadership might tell me one thing, but then I want to go and have a meeting and conversation with the team or group that I'm working with to really figure out if there's a match or if there's a disconnect. Doing a discovery phase. In the discovery phase, what I always tell my clients is that, in this phase, I want to figure out the lay of the land. My discovery phase is for me to really figure out what's going on, because you might tell me one thing, but then as I get into the weeds of things with the project, I might discover other things. So from that discovery phase, you will then create a report that I then give back to the client and say, okay, well, here's what the problem was. You said this and more. There's more here that needs to be uncovered. And these are my recommendations for how we then move together forward. So I would say that, part of that to your question is really sitting down with people, listening, and not coming in with pre-created sort of tools and things that have already been created. I might have assumptions and expectations, but I want to be able to hear from this organization what are the challenges that they're having and how do I use my expertise to kind of help them kind of maneuver and navigate through this. That's how I create buy-in, because I want to check in with each individual to make sure that we're creating things that are going to be useful for them. I go back to the analogy of the chef in the kitchen. The chef is there working with you, talking with you, working and cooking with you, checking in, and as you're going along, hopefully correcting any things, but at the same time, making sure that they get you to the end result that you brought them there for.
Yeah, and using a similar analogy with the chef, it's also, do you have the right tools within the kitchen, and what are the tools that are available to your client, right? So when you were mentioning you're going in, you're hearing what's going on in that culture, it's important not to have pre-established tools and saying, well, you already have the strainer, you already have this, or you should use this spoon even though you don't even know how to use it, or this whisk or something. So you mentioned going from discovery to report. Can you tell me a little bit more about the stages when it comes to technical assistance, from like initial engagement to handoff, like to that report, that end result?
I would say, and the method that I just described is very similar to the human-centered design. And that sort of what I'm looking at is, again, I go in with that discovery phase. I really want to understand sort of what it is that we're working with, what are the goals, what are the objectives. And based upon my discovery, these initial questions that I'm asking and hearing from the participants and from those I'm working with, I just do a quick report out in terms of what I've discovered. I then work with them to begin thinking about, defining what the problem is in terms of what they have said. And based upon how we define the problem, that's when we then go into thinking about, designing solution, prototyping it, and then really thinking about how do we test these things and begin thinking about what the resources are or deliverables that we're going to create. Typically, what I do on my projects is I divide them up into phases. Typically, depends upon, the time that I spend with them. No more than 3 or 4 phases, because I don't want to overwhelm people. But usually that first phase is the discovery phase. Usually then there is the second phase, which is, working on a particular deliverable or working with a particular group. There may be a third phase where we do some small evaluation of sort of what we've created. But then that final phase may be after we've created the solution, created the resources and tools for the individual of the program. It's then a handoff, and what that handoff looks like. I then create some benchmarks for them to look at. So if we've created, some tools or resources that they're then going to go off and implement, I also want to leave them with some metrics and some expectations of, over the next 30, 60, 90 days, here are the things that you should be looking at to really measure and monitor what this looks like. A lot of times what happens is sometimes organizations will have me kind of stay on with them during that 30, 60, 90 days just to kind of help monitor. But my goal is to hand this off to them and allow them to sort of use the tools and to really kind of hopefully sustain that momentum and move forward.
So just another follow up. So the 30, 60, 90 days, say you find out, the client comes back to you and they're like, you know what, in the 30 days, this isn't working. How do you handle that?
I go back to asking questions. I'd ask questions and listen. I think the biggest thing is to really listen and really find out sort of where I call the hiccups, where the hiccups were in terms of why it didn't work. And really figuring that out. I think it's going to be different for every organization. I've not had a lot of that happen, but in a scenario that could happen for organizations, oftentimes it's where, people might rush through something and not, stick to sort of what you developed for them. But again, I would say that the way I handle this is by listening and going in and hearing sort of what, the problems were, what the concerns were. One of the things I will say oftentimes happens is that organizations who are looking for technical assistance might come and seek out a subject matter expert trying to solve a solution or a problem or get a solution to a problem. And sometimes technical assistance isn't the right fit. So I think as a provider of technical assistance, you also have to really be cued into when maybe your services aren't the right fit, and then go back to consulting to help the organization understand what the right fit is for them. And in certain instances, sometimes an organization doesn't have the resources. Sometimes they don't have the resources. And so what they're trying to do is put a Band-Aid on something that I might not be able to fix. So if the resources aren't there, if the funding is not there, but also if you don't have the right staff there to really implement a project, depending on what the skills are that are needed, sometimes technical assistance might not be the right fit. And so I think as a consultant going in, that is part of our work also, is to really help them uncover if technical assistance is the right fit. I would hope that, in situations that I've been in where I provided level of TA, it has been the right fit and been successful. And so if people need to call me back, hopefully it's just to kind of tweak some things differently. Because again, part of that human-centered design process is looking at iterations, looking at different iterations of a prototype, because you test it out, evaluate it, maybe you might make some changes. So going back in, tweaking it, making some changes, but hopefully you're not having to scrap the whole thing and throw it out, because then there's probably some other undergirding issues that are there that probably didn't get discovered.
Quickly, what are some examples of where you've implemented TA?
It goes back to sort of my career within community-based organizations. I have worked with a lot of community-based organizations that serve men and women who are coming out of prison, so reentry programs, workforce training programs, and a lot of them have been what I always call the boots on the ground, working with practitioners to create protocols and create tools for them to more effectively do their level of work. But I think also it's been a level of thinking about how to bring in best practices. Sometimes organizations who are at the community level are so in the weeds of doing the work that they might not have the time to think about larger best practices and evidence-based approaches that are out there. So I see my role as someone coming in who has a better understanding of sort of national frameworks or national kind of tested, proven models to really kind of bring those in and work with those and help organizations adapt those. So best laid plans sometimes don't work out. If the teams or leadership kind of fall back into old patterns, then it's not going to work out. If people aren't buying into the methods and they don't buy into sort of the solutions that you're giving them. And I've seen that, and I've seen that time and time again, because a lot of times what happens is organizations may throw things at their staff without fully understanding them or helping them kind of conceive why they're doing them. So if people see your technical assistance and your role there as just another training, then they're probably going to tune out, not listen. So it really goes back to, again, your approach, your style, and how you work with them. Because, if people just see you as another training, then they're not going to implement it, and they're going to turn a blind eye to your work.
What makes TA work or stall when multiple agencies or funders are involved?
I'll go back to my analogy. Too many cooks in the kitchen. If you have too many cooks in the kitchen and too many people at the table, it's important to have the right people at the table at the right points in time. So one of the things I recommend for those who are doing technical assistance or seeking technical assistance is part of that discovery period up front is figuring out who are the important people to have at the table and making sure that you involve those, because sometimes if you have too many people in, the work doesn't get done. You can spin your wheels over and over and over talking about different things and looking at different iterations of it. And then at the end of the day, you're like, okay, what did we get accomplished? So I really want to say it's a matter of having the right folks at the right table, at the right time. But one of the things I've really been kind of toying with a lot lately and talking with clients that I've worked with about is oftentimes we look at who is at the table when we do work, but we don't look at who's not at the table. And I think that that's an important question for us to ask in terms of who's not at the table, because a lot of times when it comes to funding and funding cycles and RFPs, you have people who have won these grants, who have won this level of funding, but there's also people who apply for that funding who didn't win. And those people are serving a certain sector of the population, a certain group of individuals that may not now be getting met because they don't have that funding. So I think we have to ask those questions of who's not at the table and how do we make sure that we are elevating and bringing that level of voice in and not pushing them away. And that's something that, as I go into situations with clients now, I often ask who's not at the table and how do we bring that voice in to the conversation.
Totally see the value of that within community organizations too, because you have like these bigger organizations that win a lot of those funds, right? So they get those. And then the smaller ones, they're left out.
And I think, the level of what I think about with technical assistance for me, and this is sort of why I went into consulting, is how do we bring those smaller organizations to the table? And how do we help prepare them and give them capacity to be there at the forefront and be prepared for the next level of funding or the next RFP or the next grant? What capacity building needs to happen within those organizations as a larger organization, within their systems and within their staff, so that they then can participate and be a part of this and get access to funding for their participants.
Would that be a technical assistance project there? You know, with grants, there's a lot of metrics. There's a lot of things to track and things around those lines.
It could be. It could be. It could be in the sense of, let's go with what you just talked about in terms of data. It could be that maybe that particular organization doesn't have good capacity in terms of tracking its data and tracking its metrics. So maybe there's some level of technical assistance that someone could provide by going into the organization and helping them look at their software, looking at their tools, looking at sort of what are the processes that they're using to collect data. And so on some level, it's consulting, because you're consulting with them to really understand sort of what they're doing and what the lay of the land is. But then it's also technical assistance in terms of maybe there's some capacity building that I might want to do with their teams to understand, qualitative data, quantitative data, understanding what is important about metrics, how to collect those metrics, but then also thinking about the fine tuning of, let's say, if they're doing some level of case management and they have a case management system, how do you enter that data? How does this turn into, the metrics that your staff or your leadership needs to collect? So I think it's understanding those fine nuanced points of sort of the day-to-day processes of the work that people do, and how does that then turn into data and metrics and things that go into the reports to be collected to make a larger case for yourself as an organization to go and apply for these grants. So yes, on some level, there could be some level of technical assistance that could be there, but then again, it goes back to what the needs of that organization are, because it could be consulting, it could be training, it could be technical assistance, or it may be some coaching that you might need to do with staff. It really depends upon finding out from the organization what their needs are and what they have the capacity and want to do.
So how is TA evolving right now, and what changes do you see in the next 5 or 10 years?
One, I see TA evolving in terms of really being more equity focused. And equity focused in terms of bringing in the lived experiences of participants as well as the practitioners. So really centering their voices within the work that is done. And as a part of that, I feel PA is moving to a place of where people are using, or technical assistants are using, less of, pre-done or overused toolkits and resources. So moving away from this one size fits all kind of method. We kind of talked about that a little bit already, but coming in with your level of expertise within a certain area, helping an organization sort of evolve from one space to another, and not coming in with assumptions. So I really think I've seen that level of involvement, but I think also we have seen, and this kind of really, we saw this move rapidly over the past 5 years since the COVID pandemic, is moving from in-person to virtual. So I think we see more of a blended learning format in regards to technical assistance being able to provide it both in person as well as virtually.
Does that change your approach compared to in person?
Some of the methods can still be the same in terms of I'm still doing the discovery phase. I'm still talking with people and having conversation. I think now that a lot of organizations are moving towards more virtual meetings versus in person, a lot of the stuff that I could accomplish as a technical assistant or consultant, I'm able to do virtually and don't necessarily have to be there. I think that helps, particularly if a client is somewhere in a different state, in a different time zone, they find that is very helpful, because then they're also not having to pay for travel. They're not having to pay for you being there on site and that level of time. So I think particularly with organizations that have fewer resources, they're finding this direction of going virtual as being sort of more beneficial towards their budgets.
With virtual meetings, you can, judging on if the client is okay with it, you can create transcripts. There's AI transcripts now. So there's a lot more information you can pull from during that discovery phase.
Agreed.
How does TA ensure it does not become a one-size-fits-all approach?
I think it's keeping that mindset of every organization is its own separate, unique entity. So every client that you work with is that there are a multitude of methods and approaches that could be used that may be unique to an organization, unique to their practitioners, and unique to their populations. So I think if those of us who are providing technical assistance can keep in mind sort of the unique nature of organizations and the learning system and the adults or individuals who we're serving and what they bring to that experience, I think that we will see that that is what helps keep technical assistance alive and fresh and very unique to these organizations, is thinking about the experiences of the population we're serving and not bringing in toolkits and resources that we've always used before. Just because they worked before doesn't mean that they'll work now. And I've seen those instances where sometimes toolkits will get rehashed out and reused over and over and over. And then what ended up happening is they kind of fall and kind of are left behind because the staff are like, well, I don't do that. I don't need that. That's not worth my time. So I think it's really, again, getting that buy-in from the practitioners firsthand so that they can tell you what their needs are, and then you can create tools and resources that are specific to them.
When you have clients working with you in the development of a tool, definitely get more buy-in than, hey, you know what? Here's a tool that you could talk about statistics and be like, oh, it has a reliability and a validity, like blah, blah, blah. And they're like, what? But that might not work. And you might find a tool that actually aligns with it. Like there might be some type of technical tool out there that you do find that, hey, it's perfect alignment. And then you can talk to your client about that.
Yeah. And what you just made me think about, and which I really also appreciate, and one of the things we didn't really get into depth and talk about, was communities of practice. I think communities of practice are a great model for technical assistance because it provides an opportunity for practitioners within the same sort of level of work or programs to sort of come together. Then me as sort of a technical assistance provider or facilitator, sort of facilitating that group, but it's them having conversations amongst themselves and them then creating that space that is very unique to them so that they have different varying levels of expertise to sort of bring their knowledge together. What I then do in terms of my technical assistance that I bring to it is collecting that information. So if you have someone, let's just say in Idaho, and you have someone in Ohio who has, all this different information and they're separated, I can then bring that resources together, put it together within sort of a manual or a toolkit that I can then give back to them that has those best practices. So I think community of practices are really a great tool and great kind of methodology for help bring groups together to share best practices.
And I could see that community of practice being great for consulting. It could be for like any type of field, right? Because there's resource sharing, there's capital sharing in the sense like, oh, I know this person, you can talk to that person, you need, yeah, they're extremely valuable. So what questions might an organization want to ask when considering TA?
I think two of the foremost questions that sort of come to my mind, maybe two, maybe three, is what is that person's level of expertise? So what expertise are they bringing to the table? What is their approach? As we said earlier, there is a lot of different approaches to doing technical assistance. So what is their level of approach? But I also think about the third question is the time frame. What's the time frame? And some of that will get worked out within the conversation. But I think those are some of the top questions that organizations will want to ask when they're working with someone, but also thinking about what the end goal is. What is the end goal that they're trying to get to? Are they trying to create systems change? Are they just trying to develop their staff's knowledge? Or are they wanting to create tools and resources? So having those sort of in their back of their mind when they're approaching, someone who's coming in to do some consulting or technical assistance, I think will help that person sort of create tools or create, a solution that's best for them. I think what signals an organization may require technical assistance is that there's some level of change that they're looking to implement. So when I think about my own approach, I think about my own approach in terms of my own work and my own business model is there are three things that I look at. There is accomplishing the day-to-day level of a program's work in terms of the scope, in terms of the protocol, in terms of just the everyday tasks. So those are the level of things that are getting done. But then there's also in terms of the barriers. Are there system barriers that the organization is looking to remove in terms of creating an easier transaction either between participants, employers, organizations? What are some systemic barriers that we're looking to sort of get rid of? The third thing I would say is that strategically for the organization, what does it mean for them in terms of how are they positioning themselves as thought leaders within this particular area of domain? So I think what signals an organization may want to look at technical assistance if they meet those three things. So I think it's looking at across those three areas and those three domains that these may be some things that, we want to bring someone else in who kind of have that 50,000 foot view above, who can look down and see all these different areas, but is not so caught up in it to kind of help us strategically think about where to position ourselves.
What's one practice technical assistance providers should stop, and what's one that they should start tomorrow?
I would say they should stop bringing in old tools and resources, bringing in old toolkits. As we talked about already, stop with the old toolkits that, let's stop repeating toolkits and things that maybe have worked before but don't work anymore or might not work for a certain population. I would say also stop thinking that just because you put something online, let's say you have a toolkit or resource that's created, that you put it online, that people are going to go to it. Oftentimes what happens is sometimes people will create tool resources like, oh, okay, here's the tool, here's the resource, we're going to put it online, click it, go to it. That should solve all your problems. I've seen those instances where, again, you might let the team and staff know that resource is there. Doesn't mean that they're going to implement it. What has to happen within technical assistance, like that cook in the kitchen, and you have to take the resource, that cookbook, and sit there with them, talk with them, walk through them with it, and spend some time kind of walking through what the steps are. So if there's a theory of change, if there is a process, or if there's something that you're hoping you want them to implement, you have to walk with them through it and help them kind of think and conceptualize what that is. Not just hand it to them and say, okay, go do this. It's let's walk through this together. Let's spend some time. So my hope is that practitioners and those who are implementing technical assistance will understand that practitioners are doing the work. They're out there in the work, in the weeds, but sometimes they need that pause to just have someone kind of walk with them and help them kind of move along in that process.
That definitely makes sense. If they don't make a habit of utilizing that tool, it's not going to be used because you're stuck in this day to day. They're like, what's the value in this if I don't have the time to do it? And so, yeah, having that technical assistance, walking them through it, showing them the value, I think is, like you're saying, is extremely important. Is there anything else that you would want us to know about technical assistance?
I think there's a lot I would want you to know, but I think also there's a lot that I am still discovering. I think that is the most important thing, is that I am by no means a guru of technical assistance, and that what I have provided today is just an overview of what I see as technical assistance and what my experience has been. I think it is something that is getting more use within the world of work and within organizations. And so I hope that this will help individuals just begin understanding sort of the fine-tunedness of technical assistance, consulting, facilitating, training, all those things, umbrella terms, but also take it as that there is more out there to discover and look at, and that there are experts out there who this is their livelihood. In technical assistance, I speak at it from like an organizational learning perspective, and that's sort of what we're looking at today. But technical assistance could also be something where is looked at from an IT side of things. People provide, online IT technical assistance where someone calls in and wants to know some things with their computer. So technical assistance can take on many different formats depending upon what the need or problem is that the person's looking to solve. So we've just touched on just a little bit of it today.
You mentioned the community of practice too. So there's an importance of having a community in which you're continuing to hone your own practices when it comes to technical assistance, consulting, coaching, whatever it is.
Right.
I want to thank you for your time, for telling us a little bit more about technical assistance, especially from the learning perspective. And then I think what's going to happen is the next podcast, you're going to be joining me as a co-host.
Yeah.
This will be exciting.
Looking forward to it. Yeah, I appreciate you asking me out and to invite me to talk a little bit about my work, and I enjoyed it. But yeah, look forward to joining you.
So, what did we learn about technical assistance? We learned that technical assistance is a hands-on, long-term approach to helping organizations grow. It's about walking alongside clients to assess needs, build buy-in, and co-create solutions rather than just delivering a one-time training report. As Anthony put it, it's more like a chef guiding you step by step through cooking a full meal, rather than giving you a single cooking demonstration and walking away and saying, "Hey, you got this." If you have a question you want us to tackle in a future episode, or if you're a professional or academic who'd like to join us on the show, send me an email at odlearninglab@gmail.com. Again, that's odlearninglab@gmail.com. Remember to keep learning and leading, and I'll see you back in the lab.